Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for joining us for this first of 4 Money Matters webinars, co-sponsored by the Friends of the Sacramento Public Library and the Sacramento Public Library. The Friends of the Library has set up an endowment, the Young Readers Fund, honoring our retiring library director, Rivka Sass. So if you would like to know more about the fund or about us, please visit us at saclivefriends.org. I'm Karen Wilson, president of the Friends of the Library. Our 4 sessions, each one held live at noon on Thursdays this month, cover subjects everyone needs to know more about. Our upcoming topics include investment trends, protecting yourself from fraud and financial scams, and building a lasting legacy, how you want to be remembered. Before we begin, a few housekeeping notes. Please post your questions in the chat as they occur to you. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. Remember to keep your comments civil and respectful. Thank you. And you can access closed captions by clicking on the live transcript button on the bottom of your screen. A recording of this session will be made available on the library's website, saclibrary.org, and on its YouTube channel later this week. So to start us off, our topic today is the home stretch, 7 things you need to do in the decade before you retire. Our speaker is Larry Braley. He's Vice President of Wealth Management at Safe Credit Union. Larry has worked in the financial planning and wealth management industry since 1997 and is an accredited investment fiduciary, accredited asset management specialist, and professional plan consultant. So without further ado, welcome, Larry. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I'll put it up there, and that is 2. Cool. Got it right. Well, welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We talk about the home stretch and things you need to do 10 years before you retire. And when you're 20, retirement seems like a long way away. And then you wake up when you're, 50. You turn your 50. I will guarantee you, most people say, "How did I get here this quick? Oh my gosh, I better start saving for retirement." Now, relax. We want to talk about 7 specific points. And the goal, I think, of anything that you would attend is at least walk away with 1 to 2 things that you can put into practice. And that really is my goal. And ask some questions, and hopefully you can pick up some points that will help you towards retirement. The sad part is I'm a baby boomer. And there's a large percentage of baby boomers who don't have enough set aside. And so we have a real goal to help people move in that direction. So see if I can get this thing. So the 7 things we're going to talk about are determining the time, when the time is right for you to retire. Take aim at a retirement market, and it really is an aim. Now I'm in the business, and you have to practice what you preach. And, several years ago, I started doing hopefully the right things. And the end of the day, my target is getting closer. And hopefully it's going to work out like I planned it is. The other thing is we'll talk about is maximizing your nest egg. And how do you do that? What's available to you? The second one is really important. It's like going to the doctor and getting a checkup. You need to do a portfolio checkup, and we'll particularly focus in for those of you who maybe have just left a job, changing jobs, or maybe have done that and you have an old retirement account sitting there. What do you do with that? And then a big part of everyone's retirement planning is having a Social Security stretch. And it's interesting, as I've reaching that point, that's an important topic, not only professionally, but personally. And so we'll talk about some things that should be hopefully enlightening to you. The other one is building a retirement income stream. Now, as you accumulate money, that's great, but how does it work for you when you retire? Now, the final point will be to look beyond the money. Now, number 1, determining when the right time is to retire. Now, the interesting part about life in 2021 is that if you went back 130 years to 1890, the average life expectancy was 49 to 50. And and as you get older, you people that you do know pass away, and you're like, how sad is that? But literally, many people in that era passed away soon. Now, in today's world, it's changed. The life expectancy is in the 80s. Now, for the average female, it's about 88. For the average male, it's 83. So what does that mean to those of you who are out there? It means that you need to be prepared depending on who you are. So what age do you think you want to retire? Now, one of the interesting parts for me is, as I've aged, is with this whole thing that's going on with the coronavirus, and because of technology, we're not traveling as much, and it allows, I think, people to take a look and refocus and say, maybe I can work a little longer. And so in my case, I love what I do, and so we're planning to do a couple of extra years, but we'll talk about some important things. At 58, one of the things you want to look at is the cost of healthcare. Now, Medicare doesn't start for someone who is until they're 65. And also, maybe you want to extend working a little bit because the nest egg isn't big enough. One of the interesting facts, and I throw out a lot, and it does typically get at least some people to think, is what if you had $1 million sitting in a retirement account? A lot of money, sure. Now, what does that produce? So that the biggest fear of most people is not realized is, I don't want to run out of money. So if you were making 5%, what does that do? That produces $50,000 a year of income, and you would not necessarily dig into the principal, which is important. And so one of the things we want to do is take a look at not only having money sitting in a retirement account, but what does it do for you? Moving on, too fast. Now, why do some people retire early? Some people retire at 63, well, 62, 63, poor health, unemployment. And then maybe they were fortunate enough to meet their goals early. One of the things I wanted to touch base on is the fact of unemployment. And so for those of you who are in your 40s and 50s, maybe changing jobs, I would highly encourage you to take on the aspect of lifelong learning, because in today's world, it takes skills to continue to be employed. And so one of the things you want to be able to do is, if you're not one of those that met your retirement goal early, continue to work, make sure that you're continuing your education. There are lots and lots of opportunities, whether it's going to the library, which we want to encourage, as well as online learning. So moving on is under the aspects of when do you think you want to retire? 61, 62. Now, looking back on it, I remember my dad worked for Procter & Gamble for about 40 years and actually retired at 62. He had a well-planned out retirement plan and had an outstanding retirement. He passed away about 4 years ago. But the benefit of that, my mom continues to enjoy that planning that both of them did. So currently today, 46% of people retire at 61 to 65. What does that mean? If I retire 61 to 65, I'm going to have money producing income for me for typically, for many people, 25 to 30 years. So we have to have a well thought out plan. And so as you can see, 15% of people retire at 66 to 69, 9% of people retire at 70 to 74. Now, for those who haven't planned well enough, it's going to stretch out. For those that are in the typical average, or in the mean, as they say, they'll be able to retire and continue on in doing well. Moving on. So now, this is critical for those of you who are married. So in this example, we have a couple who the man was 24, the lady was 22, and they got married. And then at 60, what happens at 65 and 63 if both of them are still working? One is at 65, let's say that the husband is ready to retire. At 63, the wife isn't. And so you have to plan accordingly because there'll be some offsets in how you plan, and it's critical to do that. Number three, what happens in the 80s? And it's very, very typical where the man passes away and the wife is still living. And I'll give you again a good example of my mom and dad. So my dad was 88 when he passed away. My mom is now in her 90s. And so she ended up with a circle of friends where all the husbands had passed away. And I think there were 8 of them where unfortunately she had that support group that she could do. But I watched them living everything that I talk about, have for years have talked about, is to be able to be set up and moving forward. So moving on, these are some ages that are important to you when you retire. Number one, at 50, you can start doing a catch-up, and we'll talk about that. Number 55, for those of you who may have a pension, you're eligible for early distributions. On 60, widow, so someone has passed away. Widow, Social Security eligibility. At 59.5, it's a critical component. Number one, that allows you to take money out of a retirement account without a 10% penalty. And we don't need to go through all of these. But 62 is when someone can take out their, starts taking their social. 66 is when you qualify for full retirement. And at 70 is when you can do the maximum. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because that definitely is a strategy you want to look at. Number two, moving on, is take aim at your retirement target. You really do need to have a target. Doesn't mean it isn't adjustable down the road, but how long are you planning on working? And so that determines the money that you're putting away and what you're going to have at the end of the day. So a rule of thumb: one, save enough to generate 70 to 90% of your income, pre-retirement income. So to make the math easy, let's say someone is making $100,000 a year. They would want to have anywhere from 70 to 90% of that to produce a year. So how can I, at 100,000, I need to have 70,000 worth of income, or up to 90%. And so what produces that? That's a question we'll look at and try to answer in a little bit. Number two is, wrong way, sorry. Now, income needs when you retire. Your cost may go down. Obviously, some people still have a mortgage, or they may not. Your transportation costs go down, clothing goes down, food goes down. Now, and this is so true. And again, I'll draw back on my parents. Is when someone retires, typically between, let's say, 65 and 80, that's considered go-go, right? I've put some money away. I want to do some traveling. I want to move forward and do some fun things that I haven't been able to do for a while. So that's called go-go. Now, about 78 to 82, I enter in what? It's called the slow go, right? And then as I approach 85 to 90, no go. And it's very interesting because somebody told me that years and years ago. Then as I watched my parents retire, and they played that game, or did that through retirement. They loved to travel. I grew up in Ohio, and they were always going down to the Florida and other places, along the coast there on the East Coast, and did a little traveling. And then unfortunately, my dad had some health issues, and so they went from go-go, slow go, to no-go. So if nothing else, remember that today. So the costs that go away, obviously, when you stop working, you're no longer paying Social Security tax, and you're no longer putting money into retirement. Now, you do want to focus on, and again, one of the key things that hopefully you take away is that whatever I'm making, whether it's 30,000 or 50,000, 100,000, some number, you want to have 70 to 90% of that coming to you throughout, through your retirement. And so that, what is that made up of? Obviously Social Security, as well as what you've put away and what it's generating. So, so the rule number 2 is you want to save multiples of your salary based on your age. So example, when you're 30, you might have whatever you're making at 30, you might have that amount put in a retirement account or savings account. When you're 40, you would have 5 to 6 times. When you're 55, you might have 6 to 8 times. So the example is, if I am generating $100,000 of income from my work, I would want to have 600 to 800,000. Now, I want to stop just a second. I want to say to those of you that say, "Oh, I don't have that much set aside. What do I do?" So you are where you're at today. And I want to say, that's okay. You wish you could have more. But today, that old adage, today is the first day of the rest of your investing life. So make sure that you take this to heart and you start. And then if you're just lost, get with someone that you can feel confident with, and talk to them and develop a game plan. So save enough to generate 4% retirement rate, withdrawal rate, excuse me. Now, that amount is that percentage that you want to withdraw. It's been around for a long time. I agree with it. There's some discussions, well, could we pull out 5% or 6%? Sure, you could, but you could also end up short if life expectancy. Now, in my family's life, my grandfather lived to be 96 on my dad's side. On my mom's side, 90. So I always say, unless I get hit by a bus, I better have 25, 30 years worth of money sitting that's going to produce income for me, because I definitely don't want to outlive my money. And so what does 4% means? That means if you had $1 million sitting in a retirement account, that is going to produce $40,000 a year, or roughly $3,000 a month. And then you add that to your social, and the math works. So we'll move on real quick. So an example, $1 million is going to produce 50. 545,000 would produce half of that, right? So moving on. So number 1, let's move on to point 3, which is maximizing our nest egg. So our nest egg in this case is our retirement account. And so what we want to be able to do is take advantage of all the things that are available to us. Number 1, when I'm going to move on just real quick. So in your retirement account, the typical, for those of you who are working in a commercial side, we have what's called a 401k. That's pretty prevalent now. Oh, by the way, I want to mention pension plans. For instance, I was fortunate to work at a credit union for a number of years, had a pension plan that went away. Most pension plans are either gone away or they're in a process. And so, that's just the world we live in. They're very expensive for employers to fund. And so everybody's gone to what they call a contribution plan, where that you put money in, and that's, your account. So in a 401k, you can put in $19,000 a year, 19.5. A 403b, it would be in for education. A 457 would be in a nonprofit, and you can see the numbers, 19,000, and then there are what they call a simple 401k for small employers, and 13,000, and a SEP IRA, which is a separate employer plan. You can put actually 57, and that would be a particular type of small business. So what you want to be able to do is take advantage of that money year in and year out. And one of the things that's critical is that you take advantage of your employer match. In most places now, employers will match 3%, 4%, and maybe some even up to 6%. And you want to be able to take advantage of that. Maximum contributions can be for, again, for the 19.5. And your catch-up plan, that's if you're over 50, you can put in an additional 6,500 in that. So we'll add these up. We'll just keep moving on. So in a Roth IRA, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, is a Roth IRA, you can put in 6,000 and a catch-up, add another 1,000 plans. Now, get a lot of questions on IRAs. What's an IRA? What's a Roth IRA? So a traditional IRA, individual retirement account, is you can fund it with after-tax money. So you get paid, you put a little money in, you can put up to the same amount, again, the 6,000 and the additional if you're over 50. Now a Roth IRA is very similar in structure. However, Roth, that stands for a gentleman that was in Congress in the late 90s. The traditional IRA that you put money into, that money grows tax deferred. I'm not going to pay the tax till later. On the Roth IRA, when I pull it out after 59 and a half, it's going to produce a tax-free distribution. That's cool. So which would you prefer? Pay the tax or not pay the tax? Tax-free is pretty good. And so again, that's a Roth IRA. And we can, if you've got questions on that, we can answer that. So moving on quickly. Now, a spousal IRA, if you have a husband and wife, one works, one doesn't, the spousal can actually put money away. So as you can see, there's tremendous amounts of different pockets of places that you can put money into. So moving on. And we're going to pass on. I just want to, we'll touch base, and so we're moving through the, not be late on our time here. So here's a good example of a couple that started in over 15 years. They were able to actually produce an account that was over $1 million, and it was at 6% return. Now, you're not going to get 6% in a savings account. Have any of you looked at your local bank and credit union? The money is just, the interest rates are not there. And so one of the ways that you use that is in your 401k or your IRAs, where you invest conservatively in the market over time, and it does produce historic good results. And so in this case is you do need to make more than 0.5%, 1%, 2%. Moving on. Portfolio checkup. So let's talk about that real quick. For those of you who have had more than one job, and there's a stat here which kind of cracks me up, because in my younger days, I did switch jobs a few times. So one, it says the average worker now switches jobs 12 times a year. Okay, now in those jobs, and maybe not all of them, but some of them, there was a retirement plan. And so it's not uncommon for people to have 1 or 2 or 3 accounts that might have 2,000 in it, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000. What do you do with that? Well, that's a great question. You just definitely don't want to pull it out, because there's this taxable event, as well as sometimes when we get the money, it gets spent. The second item here is 71% of jobs now offer 401k or similar plans. Please take advantage of that. Make sure that you're talking to your HR department. Make sure that whoever is managing the plan, you go to the meetings. One of the disappointing parts, I've talked to different HR people, is that people don't always go to the meetings. Go to those meetings and get educated. Now, this is the coolest feature that was really activated not very long ago. 60% of plans now have an automatic enrollment plan. You know, this is part of the gig. You check the box. Yes, I'll do that. And by the way, when you do contributions into a plan such as a 401k, it's there's no tax on what you put in. So you're only taxed on your net. And what I would, can't make too many guarantees, but what you'll find is that you really don't take that much less pay home. And so for all of us, it's about cash flow. And so one of the things is, if you were able to put money into an account and not see that much less, would that be a good thing? I would surmise that it would be. So make sure you take advantage. And again, go to the meetings, talk to HR. There's a plan manager of the retirement plan. And also, if you're just starting, don't feel like you're lost. Go talk to those specialists. Now, won't spend any time on this. The typical component of a plan is 60% stocks and 40% bonds. What's a stock? If I own a stock, I own ownership in a company. A bond is an IOU that a company produces many times to build a building. A bond pays some interest, right? And so a mixture of those two is a good thing. One offsets the other. And so again, we're going to move on quickly. There's a lot of things in here. I won't spend time. If you have a question on stock, we can address that. I don't want to run too long on this. There's a lot of stuff. So now, key deal, update your beneficiaries. I want to tell you a story that happened about 6, 7, 8 years ago. This was back east. A lady who, when she got out of college, became a teacher and did a 403B, like a 401k, same thing, put money in all those years. She was not married at the time. And so what did she do? She put her sister as beneficiary. Now, a couple of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years later, she gets married. She did not change the beneficiary. So she passes away. Her husband goes to collect, the money. He thought he was beneficiary. The sister says, nope, I'm beneficiary. So that you've got those family dynamics going on. And so make sure that you consistently look at your beneficiaries and change those, particularly if you're newly married, you have children, and then also there are certain things that you should be doing, i.e. putting them in a trust. And that's a whole nother subject. We can do a workshop on those. So number 5 out of the 7 points we're going to cover is creating your Social Security strategy. This is probably one of the most important topics is Social Security. And so number 1, the money that we are taxed at work, the Social Security tax goes in, and with the goal of using it as a part of our income when we retire. And so 3 important dates. Number 1 is 62. You can take start gathering your money from Social Security at 62. 66 to 67, depending on where you're born, is your full retirement age, and you can start taking money then. You can wait, or you can wait until you're 70. Now, there's 2 sides to this from the standpoint. You'll hear certain people say, well, you need to take it at 62 because what happens if you pass away at 70? Because you're taking advantage of that income. That's one philosophy. I kind of follow on the other side is nobody knows when they're going to pass away, but it's in my opinion is if you're working through 66, don't take it until you're 66. Now, if you're retired and you have to take it at 62, that's cool. I mean, you have to do what you have to do. But also, there's on the 3rd component is when someone turns 70, tremendous upside to waiting until you're 70, particularly if your family history says, hey, I'm going to live till my late 80s or in the 90s, and I don't get hit by a bus, then waiting till 70 is a great thing because there's basically what it is from 66 to 70, it's about an 8.5% difference of revenue for yourself. So I would surmise that's a good thing. And again, that's a personal choice. But again, those 3 days, 62, 66, 70, or 66, 67, depending on where you're born, and as well as 70. Now, one recent change, keep in mind too, is RMDs. What's that called? Required minimum distribution. That means Uncle Sam says, you got to take that money out because we want our taxes now. Now, it was just changed going into 2020 up to 72, so you don't have to do that. And again, you can continue to invest that way. Moving on, we'll do that. So here's the dates of if you were born in 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, or 60, that's when you see your full retirement ages are at. Now, this illustrates the point I was making. So for someone who's worked all their lives, put the max in, here's the difference per monthly paycheck, because it's a paycheck. At 66, if I retire, this person, gets 28.77. If I decide to hang in there 4 more years and I don't necessarily need the cash right now, well, then I can retire at 70 and start drawing 3,700. So the difference is about 900 a month. Is that worth it? Depends on your situation, but in many cases, it definitely is. So and you can see the average monthly benefits. Now, one of the things you want to do is we know what your social is depending on when you retire, and you need to include that in your plan and then add in what your retirement is to make sure that you're at that 70 to 90% mark. So now, final 2 points that we want to make is we want to build a retirement income stream. What is all that? Now, again, you've saved money all your life, you've worked, and you've added up with X number of dollars. Now, wisely invested, that will grow over time. We'll have some years ups and downs, but it will grow over time. And it will, then you'll say, well, I need to get some money out of there. So what does that mean? So as you put money in, that's the accumulation phase or stage. Now I want the distribution, and that's the big thing right now. There's as boomers have, there's 10,000 a day that turn 65. We've gone from accumulation in my world to a lot of clients are needing distributions, and so we're doing that. And so you want to build a retirement income stream, and that's where you really need. Again, now you've reached a different stage, a different target, and you want to have that planned out. And that's why in the beginning we talked about the 7 things that you need to do 10 years prior. And so we'll look through this. So again, the average monthly income from a $500,000 investment, as we can see, it's not a lot if you're making, it's all sitting in savings. It's a little more if it's sitting in a 1-year CD. Again, what's happening right now? We're seeing some inflation going on, right? That does not cover the bills. And so you have to properly manage your retirement account. Number one, the ultimate goal is not to outlive it, but to make sure that it's producing that 4 or 5% income for you on a monthly basis. And you can see here, there's global bonds and treasuries. And again, this is not a bond in the stock class, but as you can see, if you're the difference between making 0.24% versus 6.25% is a ton of money. And so it really is prudent on your behalf to really understand and know. And some of that is you can benefit by talking to a qualified professional. And so, and then now one of the ways that you make money last is you say, hey, I want to have a disciplined, systematic approach. I've got that $1 million or whatever it is. I want 4%, and I can just have that monthly income stream coming right into my checking account. And that money is now working for you. Where you worked to put the money away, now it's working for you. Again, that's what most people are going to do. Now we want to encourage you to let it build up, and please do not take your retirement nest egg and throw it in a very low interest. You want to measure it out and look at being able to pay yourself when you're in your 80s. So let's look beyond the money. So level of happiness, right? And so now who's kidding who? Money doesn't make the world go around, and it's not everything, but you definitely have to have some, and it will determine a level of happiness, right? Now, if everything's based on just money, well, it's not so good, but I have to have a proper means to support myself and move through. And particularly, we in one of the earlier slides, we talked about what happens. Some people have health issues. The sad part about the baby boomers, statistically right now, 1 out of every 2 are going to need some kind of long-term care. That's expensive. Again, this is not a long-term care presentation, but it's a big consideration. Number one, don't want to outlive my money. Number 2 is health, and we want to be able to do that. So health, friendship, family, all those things are part of making it up. And so they talk about I probably am going to not pronunciate this correct, but it's the Ikagai. I guess that's how it's Japanese. What are you good at? What can you do? What can you be paid for? What the world needs, and what you love. Now, the cool thing about many boomers today who are retiring, and those are coming up after, is that if I've done a good job of saving, well, I can retire, but I don't just want to go sit. I want to do something. Now, in my own case, one of my goals is after I retire from what I'm doing, is I'm planning on going volunteering at a nonprofit and hopefully being able to give back and relay to those who are looking for some insight and education. And I just find that's a lot of fun. So so they're talking different things that you want to be able to do in retirement. And believe it or not, there are a lot of boomers who are set for retirement, and they can start a little business. Going back to school. In my case, I went back. I'm lifelong learning, but I finished a master's, a few years ago. And we want to do some traveling, a lot of things. That determines, what determines that is the level of income. So what was this? Oh, this one's kind of cool. Is that people who did things after they turned 65. One is KFC, Colonel Sanders, right? Grandma Moses started painting, and so I do believe because there's a fair amount of creative boomers that we're going to see a whole revolution as far as them being able to give back, put in, and capturing new ideas. So now, as we wrap this up, before we get into some Q&A time, retirement is wonderful if you have two essentials. It was unknown, but it is true. Who said it? Is much to live on and much to live for. And so one of the things is people only, I don't know if I got it from somebody else, but one of the things that I always say is people only do things because it's beneficial for them. This is incredibly beneficial because at some point, when you retire, you want to be creative. You want to be able to do things, and now is the time to sow into your future self. So the thing is, if your future self was here, what would you say to them? What would they say to you, right? So again, to summarize, we've looked at number one, determining when the right time is to retire. We want to take aim at our retirement target. You have to have a place and where do you want to hit, and what is that? And you want to march toward that. You want to be educated and move. Number three, really important, maximizing your nest egg. There are lots of opportunities to put money away, to take advantage of those. Number three, portfolio checkup. I want to encourage you to have that if you have a job and that you've left and you have a retirement, take a look at it. Don't just let it sit in there. And by the way, one of the things you can do is if you're moved into your new job, you can take your old 401k and transfer it in there. You can also roll that into a IRA. You can also move that from a traditional, remember that's a tax deferred, over to a tax-free Roth. You would pay some taxes, but if it's a small amount, then that's not a bad thing to do. Now, fifth thing, which is really critical, is you need to have a Social Security strategy. Again, you make the determination if you're going to start taking your Social Security at 62, 66, or 70. Now, those are critical component and critical decisions because once you make the decision, you cannot go back. And then the sixth area is, and the reason you do all this is you want to build a retirement income stream. You want your money to work for you. And then looking beyond the money, because you are doing a good job of setting aside funds for retirement, you're able to look beyond there, enjoy life, because that's what we need to do. Again, thank you for listening, and hopefully it makes sense. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Larry. That was a lot of information in a short time. I guess there are ways that people can capture some of this information.
Yes. So actually, we have a PowerPoint. We also have a workbook, and we have that, and we're happy to get that out. It's up to date, and it basically one of the cool things is in it. There's a basically there's a place where you can put in your like your finances and what you expect to be spending and stuff like that. And but yes, so there's a good workbook on all 7 points.
Great. And as I understand it, we're going to make that workbook available to people who attended.
Yes.
Especially if they let us know they would like to have it.
Yeah, all they have to do is let us know, and they can have it. And again, those will probably generate some additional questions, but we're happy to answer any of those.
Great. And we do have an upcoming session on investment. In fact, next Thursday. So
cool.
We'll get started on one of your strategies right away.
Cool.
So we have a few questions, and I invite people who are still with us to please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll capture those for Larry. The first one that we got was, what do you do now when you had to retire early and suddenly? This is from Nefertari. I'm younger than 55. I'm 44 on SDI and have unofficially retired. So they had a life event interrupt their retirement planning. So what can they do?
Well, what I would suggest doing is they really need to take a look at. I mean, some of this is just taking a hard look at expenses, right? And and it's the old adage of, do I live within my means, and really looking at where you're at, because it's very tough to you can't just generate things. Now, I'm going to go back to skills. I think it's really important if you're 44 and you're able to get in front of a computer, hopefully you have a computer, or go to a local junior college to develop skills, because what happens many times in life is another door will open that you can produce. And I know with SSI, you can't generate additional income. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do is do that. The other thing is, if at all possible, set some of that away in just at least the savings account, so you can have a downside. That's not an easy issue. But one of the things I think that I would really encourage people, because there are a lot of online classes to get some skill sets that eventually, if you do recover, get better. And so I would hope that would be the case. There aren't any magic bullets, unfortunately, but there are things that you can point to and look in the future. And again, that 7 point, maybe this is a good way to look beyond the money, but to develop a savings plan as well as education.
Okay, thanks. And Nefertari did an update that they're applying for medical disability through CalPERS. So fortunate.
Nice.
An option. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, I will say my wife's a retired nurse, and that that whole applying for disability. She lifted a patient with hurt her neck really bad, and she had to fight like crazy. And so it's one of those things where you have to be really persistent, but it definitely works out in the long run to do that. So
sure. And we have a question from Lori, who wonders if you recommend long-term care insurance. You mentioned that it was expensive. Is it worth it?
So the sad part is 1 out of 2 of us that are listening are going to need some care. That's the facts, right? I mean, so here's the situation. Most insurance carriers are no longer providing what you call traditional long-term care. There are some, but unless you have a lot of money sitting in an account, it's really too expensive. So what they can do, there are what they call hybrids that you could check out. And basically there's, you can put money in an account. It's liquid, so you can get it back, which is good. If you pass away, that money turns into life insurance for beneficiaries. Again, there's a beneficiary thing, and that's a tax-free component. But it also has a long-term care component. We love these things, to be honest with you, because typically for every dollar a person puts in that, you're going to get 3 to 4 back in long-term care. The average person stays about 4 to 5 years, and that typically will cover it. So we think that's a good example of leveraging dollars and why insurance is for. And they've just over probably the last 3 years, because not everybody has $100,000 they could throw in, is they do what they call a 10 pay or a 5 pay or a 20 pay, which allows you to pay a little bit, but you capture the benefit, and highly encourage those. So those are what they call long-term care hybrid products. So, but definitely good, and then they're fantastic from the standpoint of protecting assets and getting care.
Okay, sounds like yes, but do your research.
You have to, and because there's no free lunch in this stuff, and you really want to pay attention. There's different benefits and different times, but just get with somebody that you can trust. And I would say there are, particularly in the most bank and credit unions, you've got good individuals who are highly qualified, highly skilled, that can definitely help you.
All right, thanks. Melissa wants to know, and I don't know if this is a philosophical question, but if we wait till 70 to take Social Security, will the fund be there?
So, so now it is philosophical, depending on
Well,
what side of the aisle you're on.
Yeah.
But so I have to think so. I mean, it's as we know, without being too political, it's a little crazy, and there's a lot of money being printed right now. But I think this is a critical component. It's just like Medicare, same thing. So left alone onto its own, Social Security probably, I think from what I've read and hear, is very solvent until we hit probably 2040 or somewhere. And they definitely will have to make some adjustments. I mean, the same thing is true and I pointed it out, is 50 years ago, pension plans were the retirement plans. Those are there are very few left. Most now, like in CalPERS and CalSTRS is a pension plan, but participants are actually putting as much as 9 or 10%. So they're funding that, right? And so so can't say yes or no, but I have to think so, because it's such on Social Security and Medicare, they're going to have to develop some stuff. Some politicians are going to have to stand up and be brave, but you hope so. So, I am if you're healthy and you're going to work a little longer, I'm a big proponent of waiting to 70, because there's a significant difference as far as income.
Sure. Okay, we have a question from Susan, who says, I want to transfer my IRA to my Roth. What are the things I should look at, or is there a place to get guidance on that?
So most banks and credit unions have someone that can help you with that. Some banks and credit unions have maybe a little better than the other, but bottom line, here's the rules on that. Whatever you don't have to convert it all. You might be able to do it over 2 years, because whatever the money is that you convert is fully taxable. And so that's the negative side. So an example, I've seen, work with people where they have a $9,000 retirement account. Well, that's good. If it's 100,000, you wouldn't want to dump 100,000 and convert it and have, paying, 30,000 in taxes. That doesn't make any sense. So, so conversion's a good thing. But if it's a larger amount, I would question that from a standpoint of, because it gets down to a tax. So I'm not a qualified tax consultant. You definitely would want to talk to your tax person. But it's not a painful thing to do. But depending on the amount, and because but you're not allowed to say, well, I'll take 5,000 a year and put it a little bit at a time. You really have to do it. I believe you can do it over a couple of years. Okay,
for that conversion. So it sounds like banks and credit unions are a good place for advice that's not going to be.
Sure. I mean, and there are the independent advisors and insurance. There's lots of good people. One of the things I would highly encourage you to do with any financial professional that you're looking at, you want to look at BrokerCheck.com, and you will go in there and you'll see if they have any complaints. Because you want to obviously there's a balance to all the things. And so because everybody has to adhere to doing the right thing, and that. But BrokerCheck.com allows you to look at an advisor that you may be considering, and you might want to talk to a couple of interview because the process is the same. And then also you want to look at, okay, what exactly am I paying for, right? Because there's no free lunch, and fees are important as far as your overall returns. Again, people that you work with are 99% of them are honorable and do the right thing. There's always maybe one that's not, but look at your fees because fees can be a drag on your returns. So I highly encourage you to do that. The process is pretty simple from the standpoint of whoever you talk to, you're going to have a statement. You bring that statement with you, and you set up the accounts and make the changes.
Okay. So one question is, do most banks and credit unions have somebody who can do that? Look at a portfolio.
So the difference is you'll see banks and credit unions, typically you can open up an IRA directly with the bank or credit unions. It's an account like your checking and savings. Okay, you're not going to make a lot of interest. So that's one option, right? And it's pretty easy. The second option is most banks and credit unions of any size, and there are a lot of them in Sacramento, will be able to open up an IRA, and you can invest it, right? You can take the funds and put it in invest. So back to the comments of the slides where it showed a savings account paying 2.24. Okay, you're actually losing with inflation a fair amount of money. And so again, it depends on your time frame. If you were retiring at 65 and you were 64 and you were going to do a rollover, you're not going to want to put it in aggressive stocks, right? For obvious reasons. You want some measured out, but you also want to make sure that you're preparing that 65-year-old to when you turn 85, right? So you can't set everything in the same place.
Okay. We have a question here from Haley. It says, I'm a 57-year-old widow. What are the income restrictions for drawing on Social Security survivor benefits?
So in fact, my sister-in-law just went through that. My good buddy, her husband, passed away, and she was able to take part of his social. It's not full until she reaches 66, I think that's what it was. So she's there, and so what happens is you'll get some survivor benefits. They won't be the exact amount. Now, again, one of the things you would want to do is schedule an appointment with the Social Security people. I found them to be really very helpful, particularly the Modesto office, just because I couldn't get a hold of the Sacramento one, right? But they were very helpful, and they will guide you. The other thing is you would be able to look up, and they've website and things like that. And sometimes it's like, well, where do I go, and what questions they'll ask? But so basically, there will be a waiting period. You'll be able to get some survivor benefits. But when you turn 62, actually, you could probably take partial, just like we were talking about before. But you lose significant monthly income when you do 62. Now, some people, my brother-in-law retired at 62. My dad at 62. They were pretty well set up. Did a lot of put some stuff. But highly encourage you at least to wait till 66, if at all possible, to capture the full amount from that perspective.
Would that apply to the Social Security survivor benefits as well?
Yes, right.
You can hold
So there
on.
So there are measured amounts depending on, you'll have a young family, say the husband passes away, and there's survivor benefits for the wife, there's and some for the child, but when the child turns 18, there's no more benefits. And so you really need to do your homework again. And there are Social Security workshops that you can attend. And we actually do one specifically for that at some point, but happy to answer some more detailed questions. But again, that's an area where you want to talk to Social Security direct. I would, besides other people, because for the most part, I think they'll do a great job as far as giving you the right answer and what to take. Because it is critical that you get informed, because whether it's Medicare, Social Security, once you make a decision, that's it. There's no going back on certain things. So that, I guess, would be the best advice I can offer on that.
Okay. And Susan had another question, which was, what are your thoughts about eTrade and having your retirement with them?
So here's the situation. Cards on the table. When you go to eTrade, and they're a fine outfit. So it depends on your individual, number one, your risk tolerance. Okay, eTrade is going to trade stocks for the most part, right? And so a good example is my dad worked for Procter & Gamble. They're going to make, people are still going to buy soap. That's a, you know, I think that's a long-term good investment. So if you want to, if you're confident in yourself to manage on eTrade, that's fine. I mean, a good example, the same thing is the general investment is called the Standard & Poor's or S&P 500, right? That's the index that you'll see on the news when you say S&P was up, S&P was down. So you can buy an S&P fund that's which is an aggregate of stocks and bonds and things like that. And the cost on that will be 17 basis points, let's say. Very, very small. However, you won't ever talk to anybody. It's computer driven, right? That's how they can do it low cost. Now, I've been in the business 20 years. I make my living on it. I am not here for free. I'm proud to say I am, but I better deliver the right service. So can I do it for 17 basis points? No. And but what we're going to be able to do is customize service, portfolio service, things. And so for those who are confident, eTrade's fine. Fidelity is a good house. Vanguard, there are lots of ones, but those are typically 800 numbers, and so and that's good. I mean, no problem with that at all, because you'll typically, if you know what you're doing. If, however, you're in a big percentage of individuals who like, I don't really know how to do this, I don't know where to begin. What I would say is this: most banks and credit unions in Sacramento or out the region or in the country really have good people who are highly skilled, highly educated, and quite frankly, don't charge commission. Like in my world, we're not a commission. We generate fees off of assets, right? And those are reoccurring, and that's what we do. So for instance, we just, in the old days, people sold, they got commission, and they never talked to people again. Really sad. Today, because we do managed accounts, managed money, we are required to meet with people. And so that's the fun part. So what I would say is eTrade's fine, Fidelity's fine. Those are fine houses, nothing wrong with them. And so the question is, bottom line is, which would you prefer? Setting and on the phone, talking on the 800 number, or being at least yelling at somebody when the market's down. So that's what it gets to.
Oh, we pay for the privilege of yelling at you, Larry. No.
That's right, and it's okay, right? Because hey, your money is personal. I mean, it really is, right? And the fact of the matter is, I talked to my mom. I was back there a couple of weeks ago in Ohio, and and she's in her 90s, and it's really sad in some ways, because she's like, all of my friends are passing away. You're going through that thing. And my sister, who manages her money, she's she says, Mom, you have money, go spend some, right? And so from that perspective, but it's really critical that you have somebody you can count on. And what I would say is everything has really changed today from the old days of the guy showing up at your house and saying, sign here kind of stuff. That's gone. That's from a cost perspective and just things like that.
All right. Well, thanks, Larry. I think we've come to the end of our questions, and I just want to say thanks again to you and Safe Credit Union for loaning you to us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and a lot of people have asked for that workbook, and if you haven't yet, this is the time to do that. We'll get back in touch with you, and if you want to share this presentation with your friends, it'll be on the Sacramento Public Library website and their YouTube channel later in the week. Also, next week, we'll do investment trends with Chuck Osborne, who's managing partner of Osborne and Associates. So we'll look forward to that. And I just want to say thank you from the Friends of the Library and the Sacramento Public Library. And you can register at the address in chat or saclivefriends.org. Thank you very much for joining us.